Aloha. Welcome to History 241, Civilizations of Asia. My name is Abdul Karim Khan, and I need to remind you of the WebCT, the mechanism, how it works. Please check your schedule and the assignments on WebCT, and also note down my latest phone number and email just in case you need to contact me. And please contact me as many times as you want. Feel free, and definitely I will return your call and reply to your email the moment I get freedom, if I can do it as quickly as I can. So please, welcome to History 241, Civilizations of Asia. My email is there on the screen, but check the latest one on your course outline or course syllabus, and we would use the latest one. Similarly, the phone number that you have on the course syllabus, that's the one that you should be using, because these phone numbers and emails, they do change, Okay, so let's go to the presentation and sort of review for today. Last time we talked about the Kushan Empire, how it came from outside, and how Kanishka established his rule, one of the greatest Indian ruler, and the Kushan Empire is much more known after him. Similarly, we talked about the Indo-European trade that was established during the Kushan Empire, and then it would continue off and on with the Europeans. And after the fall of Kanishka and the Kushan Empire, you see the rise of a native empire, the Gupta Empire, which also had its own great leader, Chandragupta II. And then the end of the great Indian empires after the Gupta Empire. So from now onward, we would not be talking so much about the great empires after Harsha. That is today's presentation in session 9. We would talk about King Harsha, but from now onward, the great empires would come to an end, and a new type of a rule would start in India. So we will talk about that later on. So let's see in today's presentation, session 9, what is it that we are going to be covering. First of all, we would talk about King Harsha, mid 7th century king that ruled India. Also, after King Harsha, I would give you a sort of a review of Indian history. What we did, so far, up to Harsha, what we have done. We would talk about Harappa to Harsha, the Indo-Aryan civilization, how it started in India, to be followed by the rise of the Indian kingdoms and the republics in the northeast and in the northwest. Then we would go into different empires or different dynasties, so to speak, like the Mauryans, the Kushan, the Guptas, and King Harsha. And let's see, King Harsha. This is, the same phenomena and the same principle that has been happening in India. Which is that after the collapse of a great empire, there takes some time for another empire to rise. Or after, a great ruler, you have to wait for another great ruler to rise. And so here, after the fall of the Gupta Empire, a great empire as it was, you see the rise of this one-man empire, King Harsha. When he came to rule, to throne, he was only a 16-year-old boy, and he ascended his father's throne in Thaneswar, that is eastern Punjab. Now, so far this boy is concerned, most historians believe he would not have been able even to come to the throne or become a king or, inherit the throne of his father, had it not been for the very good support of his father's army and bureaucracy. So there was no chance for this king, to become, this boy to become a great king as he did, had it not been for the support of the army and the bureaucracy that his father maintained. That is one thing about him. Another thing was that King Harsha's army, his father's army rather, and the bureaucracy, these were a group of people that were very committed to their own defense in northeastern Punjab. They had seen so many empires, rising and going down. And this time they did not want to go down with the Gupta Empire. They had served Gupta Empire and the Gupta family in Punjab. They were connected to the Gupta Empire, and that is the reason that King Harsha's rule is also included in Gupta Empire, even if by family connection he was not a Guptan. He did not belong to that family. But by bureaucratic connection, because his father served in the bureaucracy of the Guptan Empire, that is why he's also, his rule is appendage or connected to the rule of the Gupta Empire in India. So keep in mind that this group of people, the Harsha's people, they did not want to go down with Gupta Empire, and so they wanted to protect their own little, place in northeastern Punjab, in Thaneswar. And once they could defend their place, then they could, impose their rule upon other people. And so this would be a sort of a nature of this one king and the empire that he created, or the principle upon which he created a new empire in India. So let's see further on in the presentation. Once he ascended the throne, as I said, he had the support of everybody. This was his father had been ruling, or was the leader of this frontier state in the upper Jamna River in eastern Punjab. Punjab being one of the greatest states in modern day, even modern day Indian Pakistan, Punjab very, prosperous province. This is the land of 5 rivers, and that's what it literally means, the province, the name of the state. Punjab, Panj means 5, and Ab means river, water. So 5 waters or 5 rivers, they flow through this province of Punjab, and boy, it creates bumper crops year after year. And it's a very prosperous place, and also a lot of trade and business, a lot of revenue. Anybody who ruled Punjab, ruled India at that time. So anybody even today, if you look at the Pakistani politics, the Punjabis are mostly the rulers, of Pakistan. They own everything, and rightfully so, because that's a big place, big population, a lot of prosperity. So that's why, they have produced a lot of great rulers. So keep in mind the importance of Punjab. Let's see further in the presentation. Punjab, on the map, this is Thaneswar, and that is eastern Punjab. And that is his little domain. It's not little, but when he came to power, he already had it, whatever there was left over at the fall of the Gupta Empire. So his father was ruling this area originally, and then he expanded into different places, and you would see, how far this little boy with the support of the army and the bureaucracy of his father, he brought so much of India under his control. We would see later on that. As I said, he had the support of his father's very loyal generals in the army and bureaucracy. They worked very hard. He inherited a big army and filled treasury full of money. That was, wonderful thing that he gained or inherited from his father. So with that army, big army and big money, he conquered most of northwestern India, which is the Indus River India. and he conquered northeastern India, which is the river Ganges, India, and central India, between the two great river systems, minus the Deccan Plateau. As you might know by now, from the history and geography of India, Deccan a little bit, to the south of the center, not exact south, but to the south of the center India. This is a raised plateau, raised ground, and many empires, very powerful people, they found it very difficult to conquer it. One reason being, it's a tough place, geographically speaking, to scale it and to bring it under control. It's not heavily populated area. So any king, any empire that tried to, conquer this place, the Deccan Plateau, they realized soon after, when they failed, that it was not worth the second try. Because number one, it never had great rivers, great bumper crops like in the east or west of India. It did not have a huge big population on top of that, and another thing was that it just never had any material benefits for any conqueror, and that's why it remained safe from the conquest, internal as well as external conquest of great Indian empires. It also protected Deccan, also protected southern India, the real south of India, because people could not go, beyond the Deccan Plateau to live in the south or maintain their rule in the south. So that is why Deccan and south remained much more in the hands of its own people, native dynasties. One dynasty did succeed, who came from outside, and we'll talk about that later. It did succeed, but that just proves the rule. That one dynasty, it was an exception, and that exception proves the rule that South was, much more controlled and ruled by its own people. So other than the South, Harsha and his army brought most of India under their control. Let's see further down in the presentation. Harsha had to have a new capital, and that he created at Kanauj, because this was a big India that he conquered, and this Kanauj capital, the new capital that he created somewhere in the center of India, in a place in the center of India, he made it a well-fortified city. And this city, think about it, 4 miles long and 1 mile wide. That's sort of like, I don't know, maybe 4 times, the downtown of Honolulu. It's a huge, big place, and well fortified, well defended. In fact, he wanted to be known for this city, and to show the might or the power or the grandeur of his empire that he had created. Later on, you would see on the map, from this area he would control most of India. His father's capital at Thaneswar, that could be good only for northwestern or India, not for eastern India. But from this new capital of Kanauj that he created, he had his own signature upon it, and he wanted to become known for building a new city. So that's why the reason he built a new city of Kanauj. Let's see further on in the presentation. He improved agriculture in the river basins of Punjab region. As I said, it's the land of 5 rivers. So he improved agriculture, and anybody who focused more and paid attention to good agriculture, they gained a lot. Okay, that was as I showed you, his father's domain in eastern Punjab, mostly in northwestern India, and from there he expanded. And boy, look at how much area he brought under his control, and how he expanded his rule. So for that he needed a new capital to control it. From that far off western India, northwestern India, from Thaneswar, it was difficult to control eastern India or western India or central India. So that's why he came up with this new capital right in the center, as I said. From here he could control, this triangular type of empire, east, west, north, and south, and he could rush his forces anywhere he wanted. So that's the reason he wanted to have another capital right in the center of India, so that he would have a command and control from the center over entire India. Places, they do play a big role in history. The geography of a place. Some places are just, very well defended naturally, like as I said, Deccan, very well defended place because of the natural, features that it has. It's a raised area, difficult, to control it. Some places they're very, not good for defense. Especially in India, this is sort of geographical principle that if you are ruling in eastern India and you do not have a good control on central India, or not a good defense in northwestern India, forget it. Your rule is not safe in eastern India. You are not safe because somebody from west would come and spread their influence or their rule or their empire in central India, and once they reach to the center, you are out. And so that's why most of these rulers in India, if they were living in the center, they would always look towards west to see who was coming and what was happening. So west was sort of northwest, especially in India, was sort of the weak point. So you had to have a good control on that place. And here in this case, from Thaneswar he could control easily northwestern India, but he needed another capital at Kanauj to control the rest of India, and that's the reason. So keep in mind the role of geography in history. Some places easily defended because of the natural geographical borders or barriers, and some places, you have to have your very good defense mechanism in place to have a good control and good defense. Let's see further on in the presentation. Harsha, for that reason, having a lot of power, big army, great, India under his rule, he is ranked with, the greatest Indian rulers of India. Some of them like Chandragupta, who just preceded him. He came after Chandragupta, and before Chandragupta, great ruler Kanishka, that is so much known, and particularly Ashoka in the history of India. So he is ranked, with these three great rulers, Chandragupta II, Kanishka, and Ashoka. So that's somehow like, not many people in close to the 1,000 years of Indian rule. But the reason for that is that India always lived in small kingdoms, so many of them. And these small kingdoms did not produce great kings. They couldn't be better people. They could have been good or whatever for their own people for some time. That's fine. But when they were, exposed to bigger danger, they could not stand. And that's the reason if somebody wanted to have their rule for longer time, they had to have a bigger empire, more and vaster resources of India under their control. And so that's why not many people could have big empires in India. It's a big place to begin with. And so only a few empires in the 1,000 period time of Indian history, from 1500 up to 7th century AD, this was not an easy place to be controlled. So that's why whenever you have a great empire, it would produce a great ruler of its own, who would work for some time, and after him you would see the downfall of that empire. So that's why he is given the credit for creating such a big empire and bringing India united, and giving India a sort of unity of the rule, imperial rule. And after him, when he goes down, when he dies, boy, India goes the same old way of breaking into pieces and somebody else would come up. So that's why he's, because of giving India unity, creating prosperous, peaceful times, great art, architecture, great literature. That's the reason he is, mentioned as one of those great kings of India. Another thing, unlike anybody else, Harsha, he was a very literate person, educated person. He was a poet in his own, merit, a great writer of his own time. So that's why, because of his patronage that he gave to art and literature, architecture, that's why he is considered to be one of the greatest kings of India, like Ashoka, Kanishka, and Chandragupta before him. Let's see further on. Although later on, as you would see, he converted to Buddhism, but he promoted both Hindu and Buddhist art and architecture. And the reason was, the more there was this type of art and architecture, the more his India looked great. That's just a simple principle. The more there were beautiful buildings and great literature that was produced in India, it reflected good upon him. Another thing about art and architecture is, especially architecture, in India and in other places like Africa and Europe, in India especially, architecture was based on religion, and it was the religion that produced such a great building after building, temple after temple, whether Buddhist or Hindu. But both, when you look at them, you really don't think so much, of the religion itself. It dawns upon you later on. But when you look at these monumental, architectural design, and say, my God, who could do this? And when you ask that question, who could come up with such a scheme, such a theme, such a design, and how they could build this, immediately your mind jumps to the particular religion that produced it. So then you go into, from that material, building, you go into the spirituality of the religion. Oh yes, the Hindus produce this, the Buddhists produce this, the Muslims produce this type of a great monumental architectural design. And it reflected wonderful, great upon the rule of the person or the dynasty that was in India, and that's why he is known one of the greatest kings of India. Let's see further on in the presentation. We have for King Harsha a great source of knowledge, and as I told you, in the previous sessions, that not many Indians really wrote about India. So first, a lot of Greeks wrote about India, the Persians wrote about India, and now the Chinese, they were coming to India, and so the Chinese would write about India. And here in this case, in the time of King Harsha, India was visited by Hsuan-tsang, a Chinese Buddhist scholar. He visited India, and as for any Chinese Buddhist person, he was a pilgrim. And at the same time, he was like an ambassador or envoy of Chinese emperor to visit India and learn about Buddhism at the source. So he was not just coming in his religious or personal capacity, he was also coming as an official, so to speak, from the Tang dynasty of that time. So he visited India and he wrote not only about his own religion, Buddhism, that was his main purpose for which he came to India, but he also wrote about the journal, conditions about India, and that is where his writings mattered the most as a great source of knowledge about India at that time. Now, Hsuan-tsang, as I said, whatever he wrote, it is very reliable reports on India, and particularly about Harsha's rule. Keep in mind that he found and he appreciated Harsha for the peaceful conditions, for the great prosperity that India lived at that time. And he did not miss that, the peace and the harmony and the prosperity, and he appreciated very much in his writings. He also grieved over the destruction of the Buddhist architecture, temples and stupas in northwestern India by the Huns. Previously, before Huns, they visited India, invaded India, and they destroyed, especially in the northwestern part of India where Buddhism prevailed or dominated northwestern India. He noted that how much death and destruction the white Huns, the Hephthalites as we call them in India, how much the Huns had destroyed and wreaked this death and destruction upon northwestern India. So he wrote a lot about that too. He couldn't believe the destruction, and he was also, a Buddhist religious person, a spiritual person, and he grieved as compared to somebody else who might have just passed by the ruins of a stupa or by the ruins of a Buddhist shrine or temple, but he, it hurt him personally, so that's why he wrote about it so much. Another reason for being very much enchanted and very much impressed by King Harsha was that keep in mind that he is Chinese, a Buddhist Chinese, but mentally and culturally, he is basically a Confucian person, very much imbued, very much, living in Confucianism. And that Confucianism, it emphasizes, that mindset. It emphasizes peace, tranquility, prosperity, good, orderly society, and particularly Confucianism, it appreciates and always lauded, appreciated the role of a good king in the society, to the role of a king who would be looked at as a model and look up to as a great moral, person. So that's why Hsuan-tsang found all these great Confucian traits or trends in the life of King Harsha. He found him a very peaceful king, a very good king who treated his people like his children, so to speak. And so that's why Hsuan-tsang was very much impressed and wrote a lot of good stuff about King Harsha, and he became very friendly with King Harsha. And King Harsha also appreciated, his views of Buddhism, of China. He instructed him about the Chinese civilization. He told him this is what China is, and encouraged him to, go beyond these coming and goings of individuals. Hsuan-tsang encouraged Harsha to create official relations with China and send embassy to China, and that's what we would see next time. Let's see further on. Hsuan-tsang, as I said, he was a great admirer and friend of King Harsha, and for all those good reasons that Harsha was. He persuaded Harsha to convene one of the greatest debate between two Buddhist sectarian groups, and I will tell you the reason why. One group that was already there, in Buddhism was Mahayana, which literally means the greater vehicle, and their rivals called the Hinayana, the lesser vehicle. But keep in mind that the Hinayana group is by themselves, they call themselves as Theravada Buddhist. So Hsuan-tsang wanted King Harsha to convene a debate of the two great sectarian groups, and to find out, which one was the true Buddhist belief or true Buddhist practices. So that's why he wanted to have this debate. Now, this is not the first one, nor it would be the last one, but definitely not the first one. The reason Hsuan-tsang wanted this was he did not like these bickerings, sectarian fightings or sectarian divisions among the Buddhists. The Buddhists in India, they were, a minority group of people, and they could be sometime, they were persecuted So they were under the threat of the majority religion like Hinduism, or just some people were very jealous of Buddhism because Buddhism now was also becoming an imperial religion, or the religion of an empire or an emperor or a king. So it was becoming royal religion, which it never was. In fact, it started with a prince. Buddha himself was the son of a Raja, the son of a ruler. He was a prince, but he, quit all the princely things and he became a common person. So this was a religion for the people, but now it was great that a king would adopt it, and great kings of India also adopted, Buddhism. They converted to Buddhism like Kanishka, like Ashoka, and now Harsha, you would see, he would also convert to Buddhism. So he wanted the unity of this Buddhist religion. He did not like the fightings among the Buddhists themselves. So it was a minority religion, and he wanted to make it, one united religion. So for that, he encouraged King Harsha to convene this great debate, which he did. Let's see further on. In 643 AD, King Harsha convened 3,000 Buddhist scholars to have this debate in his royal palace hall at Kanauj. Boy, think about it, 3,000 Buddhist scholars coming together. And Hsuan-tsang, he also joined the debate in favor of the Mahayana Buddhism. And maybe because of his own, great reasoning power that he had, the Mahayana Buddhists, they won the debate. But this would not mean that the Hinayana sectarian group would go away. For a while, Mahayana Buddhism, they won the debate, but they did not, win or did not put an end to the sectarian bickerings in Buddhism. Harsha himself was very much impressed with Hsuan-tsang's, views of Mahayana Buddhism, and he lauded, the way Hsuan-tsang debated with his reason, with his cool, calculated arguments. Harsha was very much impressed by that. This debate was also attended by Hindu scholars. And these Hindu scholars, they were very apprehensive of the Buddhist influences. They did not like to see Buddhism gaining so much power, within their country, and especially over the king. So they made a failed assassination attempt on Harsha's life. They wanted to kill the king, King Harsha. And, you have to understand their feelings also, because for almost like 300 years, so far, that is the entire rule of the Gupta dynasty. No king had converted to Buddhism. Yes, previously, Kanishka did and Ashoka did, but in recent memory of 300 years, nobody converted to, among the royal families, or a king did not convert to Buddhism. And there they could see that King Harsha was leaning towards Buddhism, and who knows, he might convert to Buddhism, and that's exactly what happened. So that's why they did not want to see another king converted to Buddhism and protect Buddhism with royal patronage, or support Buddhism with royal patronage, because they wanted the state money to be spent more on Hinduism, more on Hindu projects, more on Hindu temples. And, kings in India, they were expected by the Buddhist, by the Hindu rulers, by the Hindu priestly class, the Brahmins. They expected their kings to create temples with state money, although people would help, no question about that. But the state had to take the initiative in creating, a temple, making Hinduism much more, a stronger religion. And that's what they were missing here in King Harsha. And that's what they did not like about him, his pro-Buddhist leanings or attitude or behavior. And so they made an attempt on his life, but they failed. And let's see, King Harsha, he, was very harsh with these Hindu culprits. He punished them very severely, and this is what the theory is that forced him to sort of convert to Buddhism. And so this failed assassination attempt on his life, made him like a much more a stubborn person. Okay, let's see. I want to convert to Buddhism and see, what you can do against me. This is one view. Another view is that he converted to Buddhism. Some scholars believe that he converted to Buddhism because he wanted these Hindu leaders to know that after conversion, he would not favor Buddhism over Hinduism. That is, he would not discriminate against Hindus or Hinduism or Hindu temples. He would be still good king for India, but at the same time, he would promote both religions, Hinduism as well as Buddhism, especially in their art and architecture. So he just wanted to make sure that after conversion, he should be watched by the Hindu Brahman leaders, that he would not discriminate against Hindu rulers, Hindu leaders or Hinduism or Hindu, religious projects. So, and that's what he proved. He did not discriminate against anybody. Let's see further on. Hsuan-tsang, he returned to home, China, 643 AD, and he took a huge, big, bulk of Buddhist scriptures, sutras, with him. And when he reached China, he immediately set to the task of translating these Indian scriptures, Buddhist scriptures, into Chinese. And that was a great project that took him his life, and that's why he is so much revered in Chinese history for rendering such a great service to Buddhism in China. And that's why Hsuan-tsang is so much associated with Chinese Buddhism. He had already, before he left, he had encouraged Harsha to create official relations with China, and that's why Harsha sent an Indian embassy to the Tang court. Tang was the dynasty at that time that was ruling in Chang-an, the capital city of China at that time. So Harsha sent an Indian embassy to the Tang dynasty court that was ruling from Chang-an. And the Chinese emperor Taisung, he reciprocated the embassy. That is, he responded, the good gesture of Harsha with good kindness, and he also sent an embassy, Chinese embassy, to India, because he was also entrusted, to promote good relations between the two great nations, India and China, that was separated by, the big wall of the Himalaya mountains. And so the Tang dynasty, as great, dynasty it was, during the Tang dynasty, China was at the height of it, what's called the Golden Age. And at the same time, King Harsha's age, which came soon after Gupta age, this Guptan period and the period of King Harsha is also considered to be the great golden age of India. So India and China, they lived, around 600 and 700 AD and 500 AD. They lived in their great golden ages. And so here, King Harsha and Taisung exchanging ambassadorial, relations with each other, and this could have been the greatest, beginning for the two nations to create these great relations. But unfortunately, something different happened, and let's see what happened. King Harsha, by the time that the Chinese embassy arrived, King Harsha had been assassinated by his Hindu minister Arjuna, because these Hindus did not like, these relations that with the Buddhist people and the Chinese people. So that's why, he was assassinated by his own minister Arjuna. But more than that, Arjuna, he became the king. He usurped the throne. He grabbed the throne, sort of illegally according to the principles of the time. And he felt threatened by this Chinese embassy. So he attacked the Chinese embassy and the ambassador and the people that came from China. So the Chinese envoy or ambassador, he fled to Nepal. Some of his people were killed by Arjuna's forces, but he himself, the Chinese envoy or ambassador, he fled to Nepal, and there he begged the Nepalese and the Tibetan people to protect him and do something about this King Arjuna who just seized, the throne of Harsha. So the Nepalese and the Tibetan, great Buddhists as they were, they sent a joint army to, take care of Arjuna, and they invaded India and defeated Arjuna's forces. Not only that, they captured Arjuna alive in the battle and sent him as a prisoner of war to China. Nothing like that had ever happened, in the history of India or any other nation. A king is captured, and sent to another kingdom, to China, for punishment. Then the Chinese and the Indian sources are silent. They don't know what happened to, King Arjuna. After the death of Harsha, or the assassination of Harsha, and the Gupta Empire had already collapsed, India broke into pieces again. And what you see in India is the rise of petty kingdoms, small kingdoms, which is a common principle, historic principle, so to speak, or historic law. In India, when a great empire or a great king comes to an end, then you see the rise of smaller kingdoms. And these smaller kingdoms, so they wait for the rise of another greater kingdom that would bring them together and wipe them all. So that's what would happen later on. But for now, in India, you see the rise of petty principalities that are called, or small kingdoms. You would see them in the north, you would see them in the south, in the center, and northwest and northeast, which is in the absence of a great empire or great kingdom or great ruler. You see nothing but vacuum, political vacuum, no one power. And so that invites foreign invasions. And so that's what would happen to India. And now this time the foreign invasion, let's see, in India, at the end of King Harsha's kingdom, these invasions would come from south and southwest of India, and these would be now the new foreign invaders would be Arabs, and they would invade India from south and southwest. Another group of people, the Turks and the Afghan people, or Turco-Afghans as sometimes we call them, they would invade India from the northwest. And together they would establish Muslim rule in India, which is going to be the topic of the next session, and how they establish Islam, as a religion, and their Islamic rule, as a form of government and state in India. Now, having said that, what you see, in Indian history, the rise and fall of kingdoms. Some kingdoms native and some foreigners, and by not really a natural law, but some historic law. If there was a native kingdom made by Indian people and Indian rulers, when it went down, you would see the rise of a foreign group of people, outsiders from India. They would come and create their foreign empire in India. When this foreign empire would go down after ruling some time as a sort of, again, historical law, you would see the rise of another native empire. And after some time, that native empire would rule and would go down, and you would see the coming of a foreign empire. So this is how, historical forces would play in India: native, foreign, foreign, native. That's one. Another thing is the East and West India. Once you see the rise of an Eastern Indian empire, and when that goes, you would see the rise of a Western empire coming, going up. So in India, you would see, the seesaw between east and west of India. So one time you would see the rise of an Eastern empire, and another time you would see the rise of a Western empire, and each one would try to conquer. The Eastern empire wanted to conquer the Western and vice versa. So keep that also in mind. So for now, what I suggest is to go and visit the history of India that we talked about so far. So I'm going to give you a sort of a review of the Indian history that we covered from, the rise of the Indus Valley civilization to the fall or the death of King Harsha. So let's see in the presentation the great review of great Indian history. We started with the Harappan Indus Valley civilization about 2300 BC. That's more than 2000 years before Christ, to be followed by the coming of the Indo-Aryans to India, or the Aryans to India in about 1500 BC, and putting an end to the Indus Valley civilization or Harappan civilization, to be followed by the Indian kingdoms and republics in India, both in the northeast as well as in the northwest. Then to be followed by the Mauryan Empire, and Mauryan Empire was followed by the Kushan Empire, an outsider empire, as the Mauryans were insiders, the Kushan was outsider, and then the insider Guptas, the native people of Gupta. And Guptas were, as I said, King Harsha's rule is also, attached to or connected to the Guptan rule in India. So with that type of historical sketch, we would go further into a little bit details of what we did, and so that would reinforce of what we did, so far in these about 9 sessions. Let's see further in the presentation. The history of India, a sketch from Harappa to Harsha. About 2300 BC, you saw the rise of the Indus Valley civilization, which is also sometimes called the Harappan civilization or Harappan culture. That civilization, much more known for great agriculture in the Indus Valley. Also, this is considered to be the first urban civilization in the history of the world, not just of India, but in the history of the world. And that urban civilization being so much characterized and defined by the cities, the construction of the cities, made out of bricks, and the grid plan that these cities were laid with, and the straight streets and the great sewage system that you don't see anywhere in the world, that is what you notice in the Indus Valley civilization. Also, the Indus people, northwestern Indian as they were, how they, did business with outside world, especially with Mesopotamia, that is Middle East. So keep in mind the Harappan civilization for all these great, wonderful things that was happening. It is the first civilization to rise in India, northwestern India, which is now Pakistan, basically, the Indus Valley. The entire Indus flows into Pakistan, so that's why it's now, in Pakistan. This civilization also, we said, that is shrouded in the mystery of its own script. So unfortunately, we do not know much about this civilization because till this day, the script of the Indus Valley civilization has not been decoded. And as I said, if you do it, you really deserve a great Nobel Prize for decoding the script of the Indus Valley. Let's see further on after the Indus Valley civilization, the rise of another great civilization, the Indo-Aryan civilization from about 1500 to 200 BC. We also noted that the Aryans, they came from outside and they destroyed the Indus Valley civilization. This is the predominant theory. Otherwise, the Indus Valley civilization could not end all abruptly as it did. So somebody came, the Aryans, they came from outside and killed the people of the Indus Valley, and some of them, they fled, of course. We also noted about the Aryans, their racial and linguistic origins, where they originated, what was their language, what was their race, and the connection they had with Iranian people particularly, and how they came from outside and established their religion, Hinduism, which was based on the Vedas, the great scriptures, holy books of Hinduism. So with the Aryans, you see the rise of these great religious literature, holy books or scriptures, Vedas, and the rise of Hinduism in India. Also, with the coming of the Aryans and the establishment of the Aryan civilization in India, you see the rise of a special type of a social system called the caste system, which was the society and as well as the religion at the same time. So keep that in mind when we talk about the Aryan civilization. Also, the Aryans became Indians, with the passage of time. They lived for close to 1,000 years in India, and they became Indianized. So they would be now considered by about 200 BC. They would be considered like the Indians, and their system would become the system of India, social system, the caste system, which, believe it or not, till this day in one way or another is there. That caste system is still operating and working in India, although at a very diminished level, decreased level, not as much as it used to be like 200 or 300 years before. It's not as much, but still it's there. Hinduism is still there. The validity of the Vedas, the great Hindu scriptures, is still there in India. So that is the reason Hinduism is considered to be the one of the oldest, if not the oldest religion in the world or world history. Another religion that would come closer to the great history of Hinduism would be Judaism. As it started with Prophet Abraham in 2000 BC, is somewhere in in Mesopotamia or ancient Iraq, the first patriarch of the Hebrew people or the Jewish people at that time, rising with Prophet Abraham, 2000 BC. But in the rest of Asia, Hinduism is the oldest religion, no question about that, and very permanent and very deep, going into the society and the psyche of the Indian people. So after the Indo-Aryan, let's see what happens and who came to power. Basically, from about 600 BC to 300 BC, what you see is the rise of kingdoms and republics in India. These kingdoms and republics, kingdoms were native and republics were foreign. And so what you see is the rise of native kingdoms and the rise of foreign republics in India. One, the kingdoms rising in the northeastern area or region of India, which is the Ganges region, and the republics, foreign republics, rising in northwestern India, which is the Indus Valley India, basically modern day Pakistan and northeastern part of Afghanistan. Now, one thing about these kingdom and republics that we said was kingdoms were native, very strong, and especially strong in money, materially speaking, a lot of agriculture, and much more internal Indian affair, and also based on very much on the caste system, in which the caste rigidity was very high, meaning that each caste had to perform its own function or to perform its own profession that it was born into. So the caste and the profession, the caste and the work, the job and the people, they went together. That was very much in the northeast, in the kingdoms that were created by native rulers of India. On the other hand, in northwestern India, where the republics were created by foreigners like the Greeks, especially the Greeks, and particularly with the coming of Alexander the Great to India. You see the rise of these northwestern republics. There, life was a little bit light, in the sense it did not have great agricultural base. Of course, the Indus was there, agriculture was there, but not as heavily agriculture as was the northeastern Ganges region. Here in the northwest, in the foreign republics, you have a lot more business going on between northwestern Indians and, you know, the Iranians and the Arabs and the Greeks and other European people. In the northwestern republics that were established by foreigners, also you see that the caste system was not very rigid. Somebody had to rule them, of course. I mean, they are there, the rulers are there, but not necessarily as Brahmins, Hindu rulers. Or for that reason, because of the foreign influences, the outside world, non-Indians like the Greeks, the Iranian, or the Afghanis, or, you know, the Chinese even, that came from outside, they did not recognize caste system for themselves. However, if they could utilize the services of the untouchables or the low caste people and use them as free, cheap, or slave labor, that was, you know, for them all the better. That came, you know, naturally to the people at that time. This was part of their religion, but even then, caste rigidity was not as high in northwestern republics, which also means that the Indian kingdoms in the northeast, heavily based on the caste system, these were dictatorial, if I can use the modern terminology. But these northwestern foreign republics that were established by outsiders, these were sort of democratic, not as rigid as the caste system was. So you see that difference between the two. One entirely agriculture, the other agriculture plus commercial also. Let's see further on in the presentation. After the one of the great northeastern kingdoms was the Magadha Empire that we talked about quite at length. And after the fall of the Magadha, you see the rise of Alexander the Great, the invasion of Alexander the Great, and how he brought, you know, so many Greeks to India. And there he established, you know, Greek republics. Although he did not live long enough to see the maturity of the Greek republics, but the Greeks did stay for some time in India and re-establish their republics. After the end of these republics, you see the rise of Mauryan Empire. And so note it down from here, after the fall of the foreign Greeks, you see the rise of a Mauryan native empire in India that would bring, you know, most of India under their control. And the great empire of Maurya being represented, you know, by the great rule of Ashoka, one of the greatest, earliest rulers of India. Ashoka, the person who, you know, converted to Buddhism, and known so much for his rock and pillar inscriptions that he used different languages in eastern India, you know, one language in northwestern India, another language, and Greek on top of it. He lived by that great Hindu principle called Dhamma, or the moral law, and he practiced non-violence, you know, in his rule, in his state politics. Also, at this time, way before the rise of Ashoka to rule, you know, originally in the Mauryan Empire, you see this one book coming into being, Arthashastra, which deals with statecraft. So this was a sort of manual or guide, you know, how to rule the kingdom, how to rule the government, and how to rule the people. So there you have this, you know, the sort of manual or guide for the king, Arthashastra. And after the death of Ashoka, as I said, you know, after the death of any great ruler, the empire of Maurya collapsed. And so after Ashoka, Maurya, you would see the rise of a foreign empire. This was a native empire to be followed by a foreign empire. Keep in mind, Ashoka being one of the greatest and the first, greatest ruler in the history of India, very much known for his conversion to Buddhism, also very much known for writing inscriptions, these wall writing or rock writing or pillar writing that he did, Ashoka did. And he wanted to know people, his will, or he wanted to know people how to live, how to work and how to behave with each other. So he came up with all these great, wonderful principles for the society at large, how to treat each other. So keep him in mind as a great king giving great, sort of teachings to his people, and most of the time trying his best to teach people how to live peacefully with each other, and under him also a lot of prosperity. Let's see further on. After the Mauryans, you see the rise of new empires. As this great empire collapsed, Mauryan Empire collapsed, you see great empires, new empires, some of them native, some of them foreigners. You see the Sanghas, the rise of the Sanghas, the rise of the Andhras, different dynasties, then the coming of the Greek and the Bactrian people to India from outside and establishing, their rule in India, the Greco-Bactrians. Then the Greco-Indians, when the Greeks turned and became Indianized, so to speak, they would rule India in their own merit. Then the rise of another two groups of people that came from modern-day Persia, modern-day Iran or ancient Persia, known as the Scythians and the Parthians. These Scythians and Parthians would be called in India as Sakas and Pahlavas. Sakas was established, their empire in one part of India, and the Pahlavas much more in the south. They came, in fact, together. They invaded India together, but they established their rules a little bit separate from each other, as if they could be a problem for each other or a threat to each other. So that's why you see the Pahlavas much more living in the south in their empire, and the Sakas much more closer to home in northwest. Let's see further on in the presentation. After the Sakas and Pahlavas, you see the rise of the Kushan Empire, a foreign empire coming from outside. And this time, another group of people, the Yichi Mongols, they came from outside, from China, Western China, in fact, and established their empire in northwestern India. And then further, they spread to central India. The Kushan Empire is known for the great king Kanishka. And just like Ashoka was to Maurya, Kanishka is to the Kushan Empire. Just also like Ashoka, Kanishka also converted to Buddhism. But at the same time, he also supported Hinduism. From the Kushan Empire onward, you would see trade and business on a huge big scale going on between India and Europe, that is Greece and Rome. So this is the beginning of a huge, big, massive scale of trade, of Indian people with outside people, particularly with the Western people. So that's one of the great things so far the Kushan dynasty was concerned. Since they were outsiders, they knew the outside world much more better. And since they were sitting on the sort of a frontier, between India and the West, somewhere in modern-day Pakistan or Afghanistan, and certain parts of Western China, the Chinese Turkestan as it's called, or the Xinjiang province, the Muslim province of Western China. Since they were sitting, and that was their core, that's why they had both world, the Indian world and the Chinese world, and as well as the Western world or the Arab world under their focus. And that's how they promoted trade and business between India in the east and the West, or the Arab world or the European world in the West. Let's see further on. The rise of the Gupta Empire after the Kushan, and again Kushan were foreigners, Gupta were internal people, and this is about 300 years long rule. of peace, prosperity, and stability, and that's why, you know, it's called one of the great golden ages, or rather the golden age of India. So 300 rule plus the you know, the rule of Harsha is also connected, you know, to the Gupta Empire. This is also the time during Gupta Empire, another type of trade and business going on, the revival or the rebirth of the Silk Road, you know, that so much trade and business went between East and West during Gupta Empire. Just like, you know, other great kings were attached to and known for the great empire, similarly here also Chandragupta II was, you know, to the Gupta Empire as other great kings would be to their empire. So he is known, or the empire is known for his rule. Also, as I said, King Harsha is considered to be part of the great, you know, Guptan Empire. Now, beginning with Gupta, also what you would see, the rise of a huge, big, massive scale trade and business, which was not just only based on land, but also overseas. That's, you know, amazing. Overseas trade and business was very sketchy and scanty and very small scale. But with the rise of the Gupta, they became much more interested to use the ocean, to use the sea, especially, you know, the Bay of Bengal in the east and the Arabian Sea in the west. And, you know, India being located, you know, sort of a peninsula on the, you know, using both the eastern shores and the western shores of the Indian Ocean, that is the Bengal, Bay of Bengal, and the Arabian Sea. And so that gave birth to a new type of overseas trade and business between India and Arabia and Africa and Greece and Egypt, you know, and West. So let's see further on. As I said, this was the golden age of India. And now on a map, you will see the rise and fall of all these great empires that we talked about. Okay, so let's see on India. Here you see the rise of, you know, the great Indus River, and the other 3 or 4, 5 rivers in the Punjab, you know, the great building of the agriculture, and there they are coming the Aryans, you know, out of Central Asia into Iran, from Iran into Afghanistan, and in different places they would pick up different trades, different cultures, and finally coming to India and, you know, putting it into the Indus Valley civilization. So right now we are talking about the, you know, Indus Valley and the Aryan people coming to India. Let's see further on the rise of the two great empire. The two great empire, I mean kingdoms in the northeast and the republics in the northwest. One, the northeastern kingdoms represented by yellow color, and the northwestern republics, you know, represented by the red. These were to be later on replaced by a huge big empire, the Mauryan Empire. Boy, it's huge and big. Almost entire India and Pakistan and certain parts of Afghanistan. This empire to be replaced by the rise of the Sangha Empire, mostly confined to northeastern India and to some part of central India, to be replaced by the rise of another great empire, much more central India, the Andhras. You know, and that's what I told you, the rise and fall of these great empires in India. The place is the same. There you have the Greco-Bactrian Empire, a little bit outside of India, but of course, sitting on the, you know, frontier of India, they could not stay forever there, and so they would definitely move into India. And there they're bringing much more, you know, that we would know them as Sakas, the Scythians coming to India and invading the northwestern part of India, and there fellow joint invaders, the Pahlavas, whom we call the Parthians, coming and grabbing the south of India, to be replaced and to be followed by yet the rise of the Kushan Empire, one of the most celebrated empires of India, to be followed by another great empire, the Gupta Empire. Gupta being the golden age of India that it lived through. Gupta Empire, of course, to be continued in one way or another by the Harsha kingdom, and that's why, as I said, Harsha is considered to be part of Gupta, but here we represented by a different color, the red color. So after Harsha, you would see petty kingdoms, India being divided, and to be followed by the coming of the Muslims from south and southwest of India, the modern day Sindh province in Pakistan, and from the northwestern part of India, again, modern day Pakistan, and there the Muslims or the Arabs or the Turkish people and the Afghan people would establish Islam, one of the great religions, the second great religion of India. And how much Islam would change, India forever. And this would be another major impact on India is believed to be that of the British after the Muslims. So first, the Muslims, they would establish their rule, the different theories of government that the Muslims would come up to rule India, and how they would create their own society, their own rule, their own art, their own architecture. And Muslims, when they come to power in India, they would keep that power in one part or another part of India for almost 1,000 years, to be kicked out by the British somewhere in the 19th century practically. So they would live in India and rule India and change India for almost entire life. So that's I wanted to give you sort of a review of the Indian history, what we did, and let's go into conclusion, see what we did. In conclusion, we talked mostly about King Harsha, which we said was part of the Guptan Empire, and then we reviewed Indian history, the Harappan, from Harappa to Harsha, the Indo-Aryans, the great Indian kingdoms and republics, as well as the rise of different dynasties, the Mauryans, the Kushans, the Guptas, and King Harsha. And thank you very much for tuning in, and next time we would pick up with the rise of Islam. And thank you and aloha.